Hello, friends. Hello. Hello. Happy Wednesday. Holy smokes. I'm seeing everybody pop in and talk about how cold it is where you are, except for Cherie, who is from South Florida. So, hello, everyone. Yeah, it is. Let me check the temperature. It is 36 degrees here in Maryland. It's a little bit chilly today. So, I have a super fun tutorial to share with everyone today. I'm excited about this one. It's a little bit different. I thought we were done with our little holiday tag series. This is sort of a tag project, but not really like in the paper crafting sense. This one is I'm going to be using wood, and I'm going to get into it a little bit. But today I thought we've talked about this on the channel before. I've talked about Inktense, the brand Inktense. Inktense pencils, Inktense blocks. I've done all kinds of things with Inktense on this channel, but I thought we would dive into it a little bit today, a little bit more because of its permanent quality to it. So just saying hello. We've got Wilma popped in, Sue, Robbie, a lot of people, Rhonda. I'm just kind of scrolling back and taking a peek. We've got several folks popping in. Elizabeth just said it's snowy Salt Lake City, Utah. Wowza, wowza. Yeah. So I feel like if it's going to be cold, it might as well snow, right? Anyway, okay, super fun tutorial today. And yeah, I've got some artsy kind of techniques happening today and a little bit of mixed media. A little something different, but you know what? We're having some fun. This project is a little bit wintry, so for our folks who are in wintry areas, it'll be kind of fun. So don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. We're going to dive in. Many of you have shared with me over time that you do have Inktense products in your stash and you just kind of want to learn a little bit more about them. We're going to do that today. We're going to take a deep dive and do that. So let's go ahead to the down camera. We're going to get into it. Okay. I got a lot going on here. Let's just make sure we're good with the camera. There we go. Here is, okay, first let's start with the inspiration. So here's the inspiration for the project. Hi, Mary. For the project today. I hand painted some of these. This is wood. They're kind of like ornaments. I call them Moonlight Botanicals. So I hand painted these and I've sold some of these over time. And this is just one that I had left over. And it was sitting on my desk this week and it just gave me an idea to kind of just pursue it a little bit further and do a little stamp set mashup. So that was my inspiration. And this is the project that we're going to make today using Inktense. And we're also going to use Inktense as my stamping ink. So let's just take a quick look at the supplies. The supplies are listed down below in the description. The stamp set I'm using today is Growth Row from my Gina K line. We're going to be using this big honkin' floral, which is really a Cosmo, sort of like a Cosmo flower, but I'm going to use it as like a winter star flower. We're going to be using these two graphic leafery pieces because I'm digging them and I love the texture in them. I think I might be using that. I pulled it. I didn't use it in my sample, but I think I'm going to be using that little spray of hearts. So I've got all those stamps. I have the coordinating dies that go with them. I'm also using the festive greetings. As you can see, I've been using them quite a bit with the die, the sentiments die. So I've already pre-cut that because we're going to save some time on that. And Inktense. Here's what I got. We're going to talk about all three Inktense products today. We're going to talk about the Derwent pan set. I'm going to be using that. This is the Inktense pan studio set. So basically, it's the Inktense pencils, the stuff that's in the pencils and the blocks in a pan. And I'm digging it. I really like it. We're going to be using this bright blue today. I've got some Inktense blocks, and I'm going to dive into the colors. But here's the Inktense block set I have. It's a biggin. It's a biggin. It's 72. I've had it for a really long time. And I love it. I love it. Okay, so that's the set of the blocks. And then let's go ahead. I'm going to dive into the colors. And here are my pencils. So I've taken my pencils. This is a set of 72 pencils. I've taken my pencils out of the tin that they came in. And I have a lot of my pencils in one of these little trays. And I kind of have it marked right there. And these trays just kind of stack on my shelf. So it's kind of useful that way. Okay. Now, here are the colors that I'm actually using. So I'm doing a mashup of the Derwent pencils and the Derwent blocks. And the cool thing about it is the matching system. So let's go ahead and dive in to talk about the Inktense matching system. So I'm using the block and the pencil, I've kind of scrawled a little bit of that out. I'm using 1210 Dark Aquamarine, Lagoon, Blue Lagoon, and I'll be using Ionian Green, which is one of my favorite greens from them, as a stamping ink. So I'm going to just kind of hold this real quick. You could take a quick shot of it, screenshot of it if you'd like. They're also, the Inktense blocks and pencils are listed below in the description for you. Okay, so those are the colors I'm using. And I wanted to share, like with the Derwent Inktense, even the pans, the block, the pencil, and the pan all have a coordinating number and name. So that makes it really cool if you're trying to matchy-matchy, which I am trying to do with these during this little tutorial today. So, okay. And I kind of have them all out, and I actually just did the pencils. I didn't do the blocks because I know that I have the same colors in the blocks. That's really cool. Last week we talked about Faber-Castell's polychromos and their watercolor markers and their watercolor pencils. Same kind of thing. Their color system is a matching color system, which I think is helpful. Really, really helpful. Okay. Before we get into a little lesson about Derwent, I also wanted to share like the wood. So here's the deal. I found this little batch of wood tags. Here's the brand, Art Minds. They're called DIY Table Setting. I'm pretty sure I got these at Michael's probably a couple years ago. And I probably, a lot of times I'll go into craft stores and I'll see something and I'll be like, ooh, I can make something with that. And I got like no idea what I'm going to do with it yet, but I would say, oh, I'm going to make something with that. I think that'll be fun. And then I store it away somewhere and then I find it again. And this is one of those things. So I have the tag, this wood tag that already has kind of a distressed feel to it, but it's not quite ready to accept any kind of medium to it that's going to stick. So I'm going to use watercolor ground to do that. So I'm going to answer a quick question from Mary. Are other brands than Derwent applicable to use with this technique or specific properties if Derwent provides the usage? Okay, so the Derwent, and I'm going to get into that, Mary, so hopefully I'll answer that question. I'm going to get into the difference between Derwent and then some alternatives that you could use for this technique, because there are alternatives. Of course there are. Okay, this is watercolor ground. This is a lot like gesso. If you've ever, meanwhile, let me see if I can get it open. This is a lot like gesso, except that core, this is from Golden, and there's also a Daniel Smith version of watercolor ground. I use this for whenever I'm going to do something wet on a non-porous surface. I mean, on a non-paper surface like wood or canvas. So I'm going to take a little bit of this, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint this on. And I already have one. I just wanted to show you. I already have one that's already painted on that we're going to use for today. But this acts as a primer. So it will prime the wood piece, or if you're using canvas, it'll prime it and give it a tooth, a texture to it. You know how we've talked about different kinds of papers that have different kinds of like cold pressed tooth and things like that? That's what this does. It gives the wood a tooth, a texture, so that it'll be more accepting of water mediums. So I'm going to go ahead and put that over here and let that dry. Let's go ahead and close this up while we move on to our little Inktense lesson. But this is what it's called, Core Watercolor Ground. It always inevitably ends up all over me. So just get a little bit of that off. Now you can use this, remember, you can use watercolor ground. It creates that absorbent surface. Apply 2 to 3 layers. We only applied 1, and that's all you kind of really need. And you do need to let it dry like 24 hours. Or use your heat tool if you're in a hurry, which, you know, heat tool can like kind of heat things up and get things going. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Derwent Inktense and some of the fun facts. And I'm going to do like a little bit of a little tutorial of all of the pieces here. So the Derwent Inktense comes in the blocks, pans. I want to check a little something here. There we go. Let's bring that down. I was making sure it wasn't blurry because sometimes I can't see things. Okay, so the Derwent Inktense comes in blocks, pans, and pencils, and they have that color matching system that I mentioned. They are permanent when they're dry, and they're light fast. And what I mean by light fast is that they won't fade if they're put in the direct sunlight. So if you're working on a paper crafting project or a crafting project, and you know that someone is going to be using your piece, and you want it to last, have some longevity and not fade, Derwent's a really good choice for that, because these colors aren't going to fade. They're going to stay vibrant over time. Okay. The Derwent Inktense are great on wood, fabric, and paper. That's what makes them a little bit more unique than a watercolor pencil. Now, to Mary's point, you can do all of these techniques that I'm sharing today with watercolor pencils, even colored pencils. You could do either one. And we've done tutorials. We just finished up a big tutorial series with the colored pencils and the pastel pencils. You can do these techniques with it. And you could use the watercolor pencils on the wood, just as long as you have that watercolor ground. So if you also have like the new Tim Holtz watercolor pencils that I've shared on a couple tutorials back, you could use them on the wood, any kind of watercolor pencil, but you do need a ground or this primer on the wood so that that watercolor will adhere. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so the Inktense pencils are vibrant and they can be layered. So you can start with a light wash of them and layer more colors over top to create that intensity. And the unique property of these is that they are an ink. So it's a little bit different. They're super vibrant. You can see them. They have a little bit, like the block has a little bit more opacity than the pencil. So it's a little more opaque. But they are, I'm going to pull this up. You can see like some of the granulation in the color. They are just different. They're just a unique kind of thing. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do a little bit, 2 little techniques here. I'm going to show you the block. So here's the block. The block is like a crayon, but it's not like a pastel. Okay, so it's hard. It's not soft like a pastel. I'm really rubbing hard to kind of get some of that off of my finger. So you really can kind of hold it in your hand. The block also has the numbering system on it. The more you use it, the more that's going to fade. You can see that number right there, 1210. So if you really want to preserve that number for your matching system, just flip it over and use the back. So it really functions, the blocks really function like a crayon. And they're really great for a larger space. And you can see I'm just kind of holding it out here and just kind of applying that color. The pencils, so here's the dark aquamarine. The pencils are very much like a colored pencil or a watercolor pencil. You'll see me, I'm not going to choke up on the pencil. I've talked about that before. I'm going to hold it out here. You can apply to the paper. Now the paper that I'm using today, I'm using Strathmore Ready Cut Watercolor cold press paper. But these pencils and these blocks work on any paper, any watercolor paper. You do need it to be a watercolor paper. You need the paper to be able to accept water. So you could use a mixed media paper, or if you have a paper, if you have this watercolor ground and you have a paper or a canvas or something that's not very accepting, maybe it's your sketchbook, and something that's not very accepting of a lot of water washes, you could add watercolor ground to that paper and it'll give it the texture and the stiffness that you need to work with your watercolor mediums, which is kind of cool. Kathy just asked, are the blocks like watercolor crayons? Yeah, they kind of are, except that they aren't, like I said, they're very hard. So you could use them. I'm going to show you a couple other things I'm going to use them for. They are not creamy. They're hard. So, like I said, I'm really working hard to kind of apply this down. Instead of like an oil pastel or a crayon that is more like a crayon and it'll be a little bit more creamy. They are not creamy. Okay. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna grab a I've got a little, just a little brush here, and I'm gonna show you. So the blocks, really, you saw me kind of just scratch right into that paper. Now look at that intensity. Yikes! That intensity is, yeah, I love it. So you can really break up that pigment and blend it out really, really well. Look, I'm going to pick up that pigment and just kind of start to use it as a paint. And that's one of the really cool things about the blocks. So as a style, like as a person trying to decide if I want the blocks or I want the pencils, remember they both are the same formulation between both. So you can make your decision, based on that. Or if you think you're going to be doing more painting and you want to cover more area, the blocks are great because guess what? You can take your wet brush to it and use them and build them up from a light wash to a darker wash. So you can go direct to paper with it, like I did here with the block, or you can use them as a paint, sort of like these were like a watercolor well, right? Which is why I think they came out with the why they came out with the pans. So if you feel like you're more of like a pan person, just know that Derwent's pan studio set only comes in 24. So whereas the other sets come like, I think the max is like 72. So you get more colors that way. But the pans, if I hold out the pan, look at it, it kind of looks like a lot like the block. And I actually can use it a lot like the block, right? So check it out. And that, it definitely, that's a beautiful turquoise. That pigment definitely spreads very, very easily with water. So, or you can use the pans like you would a watercolor set. Let me move that. That's kind of in the way and you can't see. Let's go ahead and pop that over there. See that vibrancy? Look at that bright blue. Holy mackerel. So you can do light washes. See, I can do very, very light washes. I can get that one super dark color to go from light to dark. And that's what I kind of dig this Derwent Inktense for that reason. Here's the pencils, and the pencils break up really nicely. The reason why I like this brand so much is you didn't see me like scratching. You saw me kind of apply it to the paper, but I'm able to get that pigment. I'm going to bring this a little bit closer. I'm able to break up that pigment. So that pigment from the block has been sitting there a bit. But as soon as I apply water, that pigment like completely releases, and it's an ink. It dries permanent and it becomes inky, which I think is fascinating. And it also leaves a little bit of granulation behind. So you see some of the granulation from the pigment. The other really cool thing I like with the blocks, the pencils, all of it. This is from Derwent, yeah. This is called their sprinkler. So you can do a lot of other like mixed media techniques. If you're in my Watercolor Wonderland class, I know I covered this in that class. So I'm just making it, I'm making my paper a little wet here. Then I'm going to take and just kind of scratch some of that color down into it. And you can use this as like a little bit of a technique. And we're going to do that for our splatter today. I can also go in and just kind of, mesh that, just add some water to it. But when that dries, you get kind of like a splattery effect. So the product in itself is just really fun and useful and can do so many different things. Now I'm going to take it to the next level, and we're going to start to stamp with it and color with it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull some of the Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor. I'd love to hear if any of you have used the Derwent Inktense. I'd love to hear, just drop it in the comments, like if you've used them, if you've tried them. I like doing whole paintings with them. It's just a very, very different look, and I feel like I have a lot of flexibility. It's not super, super washy, but that vibrancy of when it dries is just intense. I'm going to show you a little bit of a difference. So when I painted these, this is watercolor. This is actually like a turquoise watercolor. And then this is the Inktense. So the intensity of the color is there because it acts a lot like the watercolor, but it's ink and it's permanent. So it won't fade, which makes it kind of fun. I'm getting a little bit geeky. I love art supplies, friends. I think you're all figuring that out, right? That I love art supplies. And I love that, sometimes we have these things in our stash and we don't know how to use them yet. So Cherie said she hasn't tried them yet. Gloria hasn't tried them yet. They also make them, now they make them in sets of like 12, 6 and 12. So you can buy just a couple pencils or blocks. And they, of course, have larger sets. But if you go to like an art supply shop in your town, you can often find them open stock. So you can buy them like in onesies, twosies, and just kind of decide if you like them. Okay, taking a quick drink. Now, I am going to stamp out, we're going to stamp out the Cosmo flower, the big winter flower. I need a little bit of water here. I've got a little water bottle. We're going to stamp this out on some paper. We're also going to stamp our leafery, our graphic leafery on the paper. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to use the ink, the Derwent. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to mist it. Now, I'm just going to mist, I misted my paper a little bit too. I'm misting my stamp. Remember, you can do all of these techniques with watercolor pencils, friends. You can do them. Dark aquamarine, and I'm just coloring it onto my stamp. And here's why. I'm using the Inktense, as my stamping ink. You could do this with your watercolor pencils or watercolor crayons as well. I'm using it as my stamping ink because I'm using these same colors, and then it's just literally gonna be, I just want to mist it real quick again. It's going to end up disappearing when I do my final stamping, final coloring. Okay. Mary just says, are these a good product to expand your supplies due to their versatility? I would say yes. Okay, so I've stamped that out and I'm going to be coloring that. So that's going to end up being a that no line look. And you will be able to get this off of your stamp so it doesn't stain your stamp. Okay, my stamp is kind of a hot mess right now, but all right, let me put that over here. So Mary, to your point, they expand your supplies in versatility. So, and it's also preference. So if you are looking to invest in watercolor medium or watercolor pencils and you want it to do a little bit more, this might be an option for you because the color range is different. You have a lot more flexibility with it as a watercolor medium, and they're super, super vibrant. I think it's just another, it's all in preference, and it's just another kind of choice that you could make. Now, I'm going to grab the Ionian green in the Derwent block. I'm just going to hit this a little bit, mist it, and just go ahead and kind of color on here. Now, you can use your watercolor pencils, markers. You could use your Tombows and do this same effect, or you can just use your straight up stamping inks to get that watercolor kind of effect there. Now I'm just using Inktense because I'm trying to keep it simple. Now I've got this variegation of color. I'm leaving it the way it is. I'm going to end up die cutting all that, but first we're going to come back. All right, let me move my block here. I'm going to set this to the side for a moment. I'm going to bring in my primed piece of wood. And you can see I've got a couple little scoochies on here, a little extra thing. This one that I had primed is still a little bit tacky. I'm going to use this one. I already kind of pre-primed this. Now, here's the fun. I'm going to use, I want to get this whole look that's sort of like the Northern Lights, right? A little bit of blues, a little bit of purples, and just kind of go for it. Okay. Robbie said, but there's more. Okay, so I'm going to use the dark aquamarine, and I'm going to use Lagoon. So that's these two colors right here. And I'm straight up just going to color it on here. And I think this is kind of satisfying because you're just coloring it on here. You're not worrying about like getting anything in the lines. I'm just getting some color on here. And I'm going to take my big honking brush that I had. Let me make sure I got, this is just a big old angular wash brush that I used. Just going to make sure it's a little bit wet. And I'm just going to go in here and kind of mix it up. And you can see that that pigment just released super, super quick. Okay. And while it's wet, I can still go in. So I'm going in here with that that Lagoon color, which I'm not sure why they call it Lagoon because it really is kind of a purpley, violety kind of color. And I want, this is like super vibrant, super vibrant. Woo! I'm digging it. Okay, love it. This is a little bit messy, but that's okay. And now I'm just going to go in and just sop up a little bit of the areas that are a little bit wet. And this is just adding a little texture to it. And then I'm going to heat set it because I'm going to show you how, you don't have to heat set it. We could just let it dry, but I want to move this along a little bit. So this is a little bit loud for a couple seconds. And I want to show you that you can heat it, you can dry it, because I want to add another layer of that purpley color on. Try not to burn my finger. There we go. I'm just loving that. It's so simple and easy to do. Sue just said messy can be fun. Yes, it can. And, you know, we're just trying some different things, mashing up our stamps and maybe some other like crafting kinds of things that you might have in your stash. I'm digging the way this purple's looking over here. I kind of like that. I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm going to come in with this blue. This is Blue Lagoon. Let's see what happens when I add a little bit of Blue Lagoon to it. Oh, look at that. I ripped up some of the color. Looky, looky. Oh, Robbie just said that is the coolest thing. Yes. Yeah, I just want to add a little bit of blue right here. And we're going to do a little splatter on it too. But I'm loving this, the way these two colors mix. And that's with the blocks that we did. But I'm going to show you when we go to stamp color the stamped image, how much more intense we can get our stamped image to kind of match this up. And because we used, I'm going to let this dry, because we used these two, the blocks and the pencils in the color matching system, we've got that really cool look. So I'm going to hit it with a little bit of water and just kind of let it activate a little bit. Now remember, if you have you can do this technique. You can do it straight up on these wood things or canvas. If you have distress inks, if you have distress crayons, distress pencils, the newer Tim Holtz pieces, you could do it on them as well. I could have gotten all those supplies out and we could have really experimented, but we would have been here all day, friends, because I love all those too. I'm going to set that to the side and bring in my stamped images. Okay, we're going to die cut these out, but first we're going to color, and I want to show you how we're going to get our blends. I'm going to work with, here are the colors I'm going to work with. I'm going to work with Blue Lagoon and Lagoon. Isn't that cool? It's just like this purpley color, but it's called Lagoon, which is kind of wild. I'm going to work with the pencils, and I'm going to show you, here they are. I'm going to show you how we're going to blend them together. So I'm going to start with working every other petal, and I'm going to just get a light layer of the blue, oh, is that not Blue Lagoon? Hold on. Iris Blue. Oh yeah, I called it Blue Lagoon, and it's really, this is Lagoon, and that's Iris Blue. My mistake. Iris Blue. I was definitely looking at something else. All right. Okay. We're going to go in. Robbie said I'm good for an all-day event. That's funny. Maybe I should do one. Oh, that's a good idea. Okay, so much like the colored pencil technique that I shared in the last couple tutorials, I'm not choking up on this. I'm kind of pulling out to the outer edge, and I'm just kind of working in a back and forth motion with the leaves. Just kind of working with the little petals. And I'm going to go every other one and just kind of apply some of this color in here to get my layer of color. Every other one. And this is just my first layer, and it doesn't look like much. At first it's going to feel a little bit like a hot mess, but it is going to end up being a beautiful, trust me. Every other one. There we go. And I'm going to gradually build up these layers to get that vibrancy with the pencil. So the Inktense pencils work very much like a colored pencil. Let's go over here. Feel a lot like working with a colored pencil. It's just a different outcome when you're working with them. Okay, so I used the Blue Lagoon. No, Iris Blue, Lisa. I used Iris Blue. And now I'm going to come back in with my dark aquamarine and go to the other side. So the inner pencil. So these, the opposite leaf, and all I'm doing is layering up color. I'm not working in a circular motion like I would with a colored pencil because I don't need to. I'm just kind of following the angle of the petal in the flower. I'm digging it. And it feels good in your hand. It also doesn't feel super scratchy when you're working with it, so that, you know, it's a little bit of a higher end product. Sometimes colored pencils or other watercolor pencils feel a little scratchy in your hand, or when you're, they make a noise when you're touching them on the paper. I'm going to work with Lagoon now, and that is my purpley color. And I'm going to work from the outer tip out all the way around. And I'm not going to touch into the blue area. I'm just adding a little bit of that blue, that lagoon color to my outer edge. I'm just kind of following the line here. Oh, I just love it. How's everybody's, you know, we're getting close to our holiday, getting close to Christmas and Hanukkah and all the things. How's everybody doing? How's everybody Christmas cards going? I have made none. But that's okay. That's okay. I am enjoying sharing these tutorials with you all over the last couple weeks. And I felt like, let's move into a wintry kind of look and feel. This looks like a hot mess, right? So at this point, you might feel like concerned that what you're doing isn't looking that good. But trust me, this is all just kind of part of blending or getting your colors layered up for blending. Cherie just said it's coming along. Things are coming along. Good, good, good. Good, good. I know that some areas of the country we've already had snow, which brings its own challenges. Wilma says she's finishing up her cards. And Sue says she's in the process of sending hers out. That's pretty awesome. Robbie said, I've only cut out dies so far. I feel that. I've only cut out dies. But you know what? Sometimes all that pre-work that you're doing, like if you're doing a lot of cards and you're doing the same design, sometimes that pre-work is really, really helpful, and it makes the end product go super fast. Okay, my center here, I'm going to add just a little bit of this blue lagoon right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add just a little smidge of the dark aquamarine right here. All right, now I'm going to bring this up so you can see it. I've layered in my Inktense colors. It kind of looks a little bit like a hot mess, but that's okay. We're going to go in and I'm going to show you how easy this is going to be to blend this out. I'm going to start. Now, this is, you know, my brush is wet, my paper is dry, and I want to kind of just keep my brush not super soaky, not super soaked. I just want it to be a little bit wet so that I can work those two pigments together and those two colors and watch them explode into each other. Ah! And like let them blend and mash into each other for this beautiful kind of wintry northern lights like flower that, you know, doesn't really exist in, it might, I don't know, it doesn't really exist out there in the world, but that's okay. One of the things I really like about our stamps and working with our stamped images is that we can color them up any way we want. If we want the color to be realistic, we can achieve that. If we, I'm not worrying about going outside the lines, friends, because we are gonna go ahead and die cut these out. Sue just said she's making an anniversary card for a friend whose anniversary is coming up. Yes, well, that's very nice. Okay, so I'm gonna step around here and just go to every other petal, just to kind of so that my water doesn't bleed. Although I wouldn't mind if it did. But look at the colors. Oh, I just love it. So these Inktense pencils really blend really nicely together. They are very, very easygoing medium. So if you're using your watercolor pencils for this technique, again, you can do the same thing. And you can apply the color the same way. I'm just sharing this because ultimately our end product is kind of a wood tag, wood ornament, and we want it to have a little bit of longevity. If it was paper piece, it might tear or break, but this is not paper. Well, this is paper. We're layering paper over wood. So I'm using Inktense because I want it to be more permanent. All right, I'm going to go back in here and just kind of blend these out. The blending is really easy. You don't see me pushing really hard, and I'm just barely touching it with the water and getting that nice blend there. Oh, I love it. I'm loving this color. We're going to jack it up even more. I'm going to use the pans in here just to kind of jack up that center even more. I feel like when you're working with watercolor pencils too, or Inktense pencils or something similar, you've got a lot of control. So sometimes this is a great way to enter into using water-based mediums like watercolor, because you feel a little more in control because it's a pencil versus starting right out of the gate. If you're getting started with watercolor and you're using tubes or pans, it sometimes feels like it would be a little bit, when you're getting started, you feel a little bit out of control. Mary just says, seems like this process is a lot like color pencil and Gansol. Yes, exactly. Just another way of doing it. And more of a watery, washy color kind of look. And a different medium. And I like kind of doing these tutorials because A, people ask me to do them because they either have them in their stash and they want to experiment. And B, it's just kind of another technique where you could, or another project idea that you can modify with the products that you have on hand. So I'm just going to go ahead in here and adding a little bit of water to this center. And I'm going to take a little bit of that out, but I am loving the way this looks. Okay. Now, I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to dry this real quick and just kind of show you. A lot of watercolor mediums, when you do a layer like this and you dry it or it dries back a shade. Inktense pencils don't dry back as much. They stay pretty vibrant. But I am going to hit this because I want to move on. And I want to add another layer of color. Woo! I love it. I'm loving it, loving it, loving it. Loving it, loving it, loving it. Okay. I feel like I could use the watercolor pencils. Yes, Rhonda, you absolutely could use the watercolor pencils with this technique. Look at that vibrancy. And I also didn't break up the pigment as much. Look, I kind of blended that pigment, but I left some of that grainy look to it, and that adds a little bit of extra texture. Now, I want to come in and I'm going to draw some attention to the center of the flower here. I'm going to use a little bit of this bright blue. Go ahead and pop that down there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of add a little bit of that bright blue to the very, very center of this floral. And it's just going to draw our eye in a little bit more to the center. I'm and I've just applied this, and it looks a little bit like a hot mess, but I'm working kind of fast at cleaning my brush. And I'm going to come in and just kind of touch the edges of that and let it do its thing. Let it blend. Let it move. Oh, love it. Yes, so Mary said that she liked that it stays its true color. Yes, that's one of the unique things about the Inktense. The other thing is that makes it different. I'm just going out to this outer edge here, just adding a little bit of clean water. One of the things that makes this very different from watercolor and watercolor pencils is that when it's dry, I'm just going to dry it because we're going to die cut next. Actually, I have a little surprise. Once it's dry, friends, it's dry. It's permanent. I will not be able to go in with my water and lift that color up. If you're using watercolor or watercolor pencils, you can reactivate your watercolor and get it to move a little bit more. So in that sense, the Inktense are less forgiving. They're more permanent. All right, I'm going to do a really fun technique now. Now, I'm loving this. I'm loving the way this looks. It's got a lot of texture. It's got a lot of dimension, but I want to jack it up a little bit and make it super graphic. So I've got my stamp again, and I'm just hitting it with a little mist from a distance. And I'm going to go in with the aquamarine again and just use it as my stamping ink. I'm just applying it to the wet raised areas of the petals. Okay. And I'm going to mist it one more time. I just want to keep this a little bit wet. And now I'm going to take it and stamp over top. But instead of doing like a two-step stamping kind of thing, I'm going to turn my stamp and make it wonky. And just kind of stamp down so that I get the layering that I'm trying to achieve. So I've got, let's just go ahead and hit this with a little bit of water. I mean, a little bit of heat. I've got a graphic look to it. It kind of looks like a starburst almost. We've got the coloring that we've done underneath, and then I've got that layer over top. So I've got a little extra texture and dimension. Now I'm going to bring this in. It's still a little bit wet. Yikes! We're going to have to heat that. But while I'm going to let that dry a little bit, I'm going to grab my dies and I'm going to cut out my pieces, my 3 pieces here. And then we're going to start playing around with the whites. So I'm going to go to the side here and go ahead and die cut this out with the dies. Yes, I am still working on my bringing the camera over. But you know what? I think everybody knows how to do the die cutting, so I tend to not show that on the lives. So I've got this. I'm running it through my Platinum 6. I'm running all of my pieces through. Let's get that lined up. Got a little wonky there. Oh, I'm really loving this. Really loving the way this looks. Okay. So run that through the die cutter. Do, 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 do. Okay. Let's take all my pieces. All my pieces. Here we go. So we have our pieces. And we have this color is really intense. Really intense. We're going to knock it back a little bit. All right, I've got my tag is still a little bit wet. So let's go ahead and we're going to dry it. And as I'm drying it, I'm kind of hitting it with a lot more heat. It's going to make some of that paint bubble. You can start to see it bubbling. Whew. I have to burn my finger. Get a little bit of that texture there with the bubbling. Ooh, love, 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 love. Okay. Okay. Now we're pretty dry. Yes. Okay. Now I'm going to do a little quick experiment. I'm thinking about using this stamp, but let's see. I didn't do that on my other piece. Let's save that for last. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just start assembling. This is looking a little bit too much like tone on tone, but that's okay. We're going to add a lot more white to this and get it to kind of pop. I also have a little bit of silver that I'm going to add to this. So I've got some tape here, and I'm going to go ahead in and put a little bit of tape on the back and put my flower down here in this lower corner. Yes. Okay. Let's just kind of pop my flower down here in this lower corner. And then I've got some Connect glue. This Connect glue is really good. It really adheres well to paper and also the wood. We're going to see, like, as I just kind of adhere this, it's really works really well. We've got this little bit of 3D going here. I'm going to pop that underneath there and just kind of let that go up and out. So for our design, we're kind of like hovering around here to just kind of focus our attention in this general area for that sentiment. The sentiment I picked was from that Festive Greetings, and I picked Wishing You Joy, and here's why. Because wishing you joy isn't necessarily, although it's used a lot during the holiday time, it isn't necessarily just a holiday sentiment. Right? It's not necessarily just a holiday sentiment. I kind of wish I would have did this a little bit darker, but that's okay. It kind of is a nice sentiment to share all year round. Now, I've got this little leaf, the little petal. I want to nest that petal right there between the U and the J, and then just kind of create a relationship between this sentiment, this piece of leafery, and that petal. So let's go ahead. Just add a little glue to that. Rhonda just said, I love the blues, so perfect for winter. Yes! Just kind of going for that northern lights kind of look. I'm loving that. Okay. And I'm just going to drop my finger down here and let that be. Then I'm going to take this piece right here, that little tiny piece of leafery, just kind of hanging off there. I'm going to add a little drop right there on that sentiment so that I can kind of coax that piece of leafery right into the sentiment there. And let that just kind of all mesh together to create that relationship with that. All right, this moved just a smidge. I don't want it to move that much. I want these two pieces to stick. So I'm just going to hold that real quick. And I'm kind of digging that. Okay, now, this is the white Inktense block. And what I'm going to do, where's my brush, is I'm going to take it. What I really love, if you don't have Inktense at all, but you have a chance to get the white or the white pencil, like here's the white pencil, consider getting just the white. Just for the splatter techniques alone and the intensity of this white, because it's super, super opaque. Okay. Now I'm going to use this. I'm going to grab my pen, and I've just got my white down here, and I'm going to focus my splatter on, look how intense that is. Focus my splatter on my little star flower here. You can even just kind of flick it right from here. But I just love how intense it is. Now I'm going to come up here and add some more. Add some more, and then we're going to pop in with a little bit of silver. Look at those big honking splatters to just kind of tone it down. Tone back some of that color. All right, I'm going to let that dry. Now let's take a peek at what would happen if I stamp that little splatter piece on. Maybe up in that corner. Let's see what we get. I'm just going to hit all this with a little bit of water and just kind of, I got a feeling this isn't going to really work the way my brain thinks it's going to work, but let's give it a try. If I just kind of splattered that, oh, that's stuck right there. Right there, what would happen? Yeah, you can see it a little bit, but not as intense as I wanted it to be. You could probably use a white pigment ink with that stamp and really get that splattery kind of effect. But I'm going to leave it the way it is. Okay, loving the way this is looking. Let's go ahead and move some things out of the way here so that I don't end up getting everything everywhere. And let's take a peek, because I am going to come in with a little bit of silver. The colors are intense. A lot of intensity here. So I have a Uniball Signo. You could use the Uniball Signo white if you want, but I have a silver pen. And I'm going to concentrate a little bit of a silvery kind of movement right here. I'm just going to go in. Hold it. I'm trying to hold it where it isn't wet, and just add a little bit of dots. I really like this pen because it's very, the color releases really, really quickly. I'm going to bring this up, kind of show you like how easily you can make little dots with it. The color releases. The Uniball Signo Silver, there's a gold one in this too, which I think is really nice. And this just adds a little bit of like silver touch to it. I'm going to go in and add a little bit of that silver to the center of this flower, just to get a little bit more. You could add sequins and embellishments as well, but I kind of just wanted to stick with the color mediums and see what we got here. So I'm kind of digging it. Okay, so here's the original, a lot lighter. Here is this one, a lot darker. I could even, if you didn't like how dark this was and you really wanted to tone it down a little bit more, I could even come in and just kind of add a little wash of white over some of that, over some of the areas that I felt were a little bit dark. And that would tone some of it down. It's not a necessary fix, but if I really wanted to tone some things down a little bit, like I could drop in a little bit of white here. And I guess I really didn't like it because I'm in here adding a little bit of white to kind of tone things down a little bit. And that's kind of helps tone things down. Okay, I'm digging it. I'm loving the way these look. I'm loving the way this looks. I hope, let's go ahead and head to the front camera because we almost made this. This is a pretty intense tutorial, and we pretty much made it in the hour, which is like a miracle. Again, little messy technique, but super fun. So I hope you got a lot out of this Inktense. I wanted to get them all out and just kind of share them with you and do some really fun kind of artful techniques. Remember, you could make something like this that's more 3D, you know, and you could pop it on a card if you wanted to. So that card ends up being kind of an interactive card. You're giving them a card and giving them a gift as part of the card. So super fun. So, okay, I hope that you really enjoyed this tutorial and it just kind of sends you into the rest of the week and the weekend inspired to get your Inktense out if you have them, or get out your other watercolor mediums and do this technique with the stamps that you have. It's never lost on me that you're spending time with me and learning something new. So I'm very, very grateful to you for being here with me today. If you're at all interested in joining my email list, I would love to have you in my email list community. The link is in the description. I share emails either 3 to 4 times a month. And I always share when I'm going live for my tutorials. I give a lot of discounts. If you're on my email list, yesterday I sent a huge freebie out to everyone. You can also join my community in my Craft Your Joy classroom at craftyourjoy.com. The link is in the description for that as well. And I'm going to be sharing a lot. I'm sharing a lot more of my content in my own community versus on my business Facebook page, because I'm really feeling like people aren't seeing things. So this is one great way to just get all the tutorials in addition to my YouTube channel here. So, okay. I'm thinking I'm going to be back next week, and I'd love to hear from everyone. But I think I'm not going to do something super intense. I'm actually thinking about just doing a really easygoing watercolor painting tutorial. And maybe the whole card is just made up, or the project is just made up of watercoloring. I'm not sure yet. So I think I will be back next Wednesday, and then I'll be taking off for the holiday season and be back in the new year. But I say that now, but I could be back the following week. You never know. So I hope you have a great week. If you have any questions along the way, you know how to reach me. And I really am grateful that you joined me today. And I hope you got a lot of value out of this tutorial today. And I'll see you next time. Have a great day, friends. Stay warm.